Buddy.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Francis.
James is doing this one, right?
He asked me to because he said, "Hey, do you want to showcase multiple prefix?" So that's what I'm going to do.
Okay,
Can't
cool.
guarantee any of this will work, but it will be hopefully entertaining. Trying to dial down the exposure on my webcam right now. Whatever. So let me just pull the documentation so we are all on the same page on what's happening today. All right, I think I'll wait one more minute in case anybody else joins, or 15 more seconds.
I'll just post in the Gitaly channel just in case people are snoozing.
Yeah, I already did 2 minutes ago, so, but you're welcome to. I will invite, let's see. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and, hi James, welcome aboard. I'm going to get started here. Today's demo is going to involve multiple prefix. That's something I don't think anybody else has done yet. So if you look at this picture, we claim to have multiple prefix, but we actually haven't done this before. So this will be the new wrinkle. And then I think we've also added a replication queue to this whole system. So we'll be demoing some new stuff here. So now I've gone ahead and I've done most of the basic prep work. So all this stuff, getting Postgres up and running is done, getting prefix. But like I said, the difference was that I actually now on this, if you can see my bottom, these are 3 prefix nodes running on then Google Cloud, and then top 3 are 3 Gitaly nodes. But I did want to leave some things to kind of configure so we could all sort of get on the same page. So this is all done on 3 of the prefix nodes. That's all the same. And Gitaly nodes, saying likewise, I've configured all these nodes to be up with these configuration settings. Didn't run into anything strange there. The only thing I left was just configuring GitLab itself here. So here we say configure, add the prefix cluster. And this is a little confusing because it's called prefect, and then I've got like multiple prefix, but anyway, I don't know if it's intentional. We want to call it by something more obvious because now we've got Gitaly nodes, prefix nodes, and then now when I go here, I see this, I'm like, okay, what if I've got, anyway. So that's just
I
a little.
think maybe we should default them to like storage 1, storage 2.
Yeah, something like making it obvious that it's a virtual storage or something like that. Because I was almost tempted to put in like Gitaly stuff, prefix stuff in here, but then I saw that. Anyway, so if we look at this config, get data dirs, I went ahead and just, I mean, we're just using the same external token. But this, I guess this confused me a little because this is supposed to be prefect on only one a prefix? Like, are we assuming there's going to be a load balancer in front of this prefix IP now? Right, because you see it's a single prefix host. Or should I?
Yeah, I think I don't know how this is going to work. I raised this with ZJ yesterday night when I had a one-on-one, and said I was a little concerned that our docs are so geared at like a single prefect configuration. because a lot of these questions are completely unanswered at the moment.
Okay. I will assume
That
for
would-
now that we're just gonna put a load balancer in front of this. I haven't set it up that way yet, but that's just something that kind of stuck out when I was going about this.
Yeah, I think it would be the load balancer. That's my guess.
Yeah.
But the other question is like, what load balancer do we recommend? Like, is there there's probably like S3 and AWS and Google load balancer
Right.
products that you could use, or maybe you could run your own load balancer. Like, what load balancer would that be? Does Omnibus need to package a load balancer that can be used for this purpose?
Yeah, these are all good questions. I think for GitLab.com, the simplest thing we would probably do, we're already using Google Load Balancer. We would just basically plug in that IP address. But then it does bring the question is like, well, how do we decide a prefix node is unhealthy? Like, is it just a TCP check? So anyway, all these questions we'll have to answer. I'm not going to answer them today, but I'm just raising them because as I was going through this documentation, I was a little confused. Okay, so you can see I added Prometheus scrape targets. I left one out just so we could do it live. I believe, let me just check my notes. That is going to be .54. Prefix, oh, it's 55, 56, and actually 65 is what I want here. Okay, so I've got all three prefix in there and all three Gitaly nodes in there, and that should be good. I think that's what this is saying here. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and reconfigure that. So even though I'm gonna have three prefix in this demo, it will really only be talking to one of them right now. But I will show you how this leader election stuff works. All right, so let's run this rate check task here. And while that's going, I'm just going to go ahead and, well, let's see. Okay, so everything's good there. I'm going to go to the UI, and I think there was a bug before that you guys were worried about. If you click this button, it doesn't actually take effect right away. It should now, so I'm going to, do we toggle that off? Is that what we tell people in the documentation? Deselect,
Yeah,
yes.
there's a merge request that I opened late yesterday, which adds a screenshot to increase the emphasis of that. But the current docs do say to turn off default and only enable the prefect. So
I'll make this public just in case you. All right, so I'm going to create it right away and not wait for that minute like we did before, just to monitor. Okay, so now we have this, and let's verify that this thing actually ended up in the right shard there. Prefix. So I think we had a bug before where that wouldn't take effect right away. It takes effect now. So that's good. What else do we need to do in this location? Oh, all right. So I think I just configured this Grafana dashboard. Let me refresh it now. 5 minutes. And so this is the replication latency. Oh gosh, I gotta do some of those tooltips. I'm trying to see and make sure there's all. So Prometheus should be bringing in the latest script. Okay. Oh, I know. Okay. So I wanted to show. Now that we've got three prefix, they are each trying to ping all the different Gitaly nodes. And I think before they were just doing this in memory. I think, John, your implementation was just, one of the prefect. And see, if you see here, we have different, it's kind of hard to see here, but you can see there's right now there's two prefect nodes all saying Gitaly 1 is the primary. And so how do they agree on it, right? Well, they use this database now. So if you look at the database now, there's these two new tables, prefix node status and prefix shard primary. So the node status is just really a table of, let's see if I can make that a little bigger. It's just showing I've got a bunch of Gitaly nodes, and so you see prefix 1, 2, and 3 on the left side, and then you see like which nodes, Gitaly 1, 2, and 3, and then each row represents like, hey, I last tried to talk to this person. This is when I last saw this person active, this node active. So you can see we're missing one here, and that means it wasn't able to talk to Gitaly 3. So Gitaly 3 will actually, and the reason why it's Gitaly 3 hasn't been configured yet. I purposely left it off. If you actually look at the prefix, now this is prefix. If you look at the prefix logs, you'll see that the health checks are failing for that node. So you see these failures here. So I'm going to go ahead and just, so if you look at the GitLab RB here, it's pretty much empty. It's basically the default config. So I'm going to, I put a working version of it here with all the right, configuration, Gitaly enabled true, blah, 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 internal IP set. So I'm just going to head and reconfigure that. And then when we do that, we should see this table being updated once it's up with no more gaps there. I will point out on the prefix, there's new configuration that this hasn't been merged, isn't an omnibus yet, but for the purposes of this demo, I'm just showing you which configuration options are being used now. So this is going back to the whole SQL election process here. Now, I mentioned there was 2 tables on this database. The other table is the elected primary. So if I look at what's there, it's a single row right now because it's saying, hey, this shard, what we called prefect, the current primary is Gitaly 1. And this just tells you that this Gitaly 1, the prefect 1 decided this is going to be the leader, and then everybody else is going to just look at this database. And this is the time at which it was elected. So I like to turn on full statement logging for debugging in my Postgres log, so you can actually see that it's like up. It's let me just correct for prefix stuff. But you can see that it's
Can I ask you a question
periodically.
real quick?
Yep.
So you have multiple prefix configured. Did you just modify the prefix toml directly?
So
okay.
I have an omnibus MR to do this, but I didn't push this out yet. So this is the
Got
easiest way.
it.
So all of them I just directly edited. So if I do reconfigure, it's going to blow it away.
Right. Okay, so I was wondering. Okay. So
you can see just periodically, it's there's 2 different kind of queries. This one is just like telling me, hey, who's the primary, right? We did that select statement, and all the nodes are saying, hey, who's the primary? I'll update my internal state to reflect that periodically. And then the other one is I'm just going to update the state of what I see when I'm all these prefix nodes are doing ping-based health checks with all the different Gitaly nodes, and then it's just updating its database. So if I go back to the original one, you now see that once we brought up Gitaly 3, everything is now last seen very recently. So then that should be reflected. Well,
Stan, one question. So you showed in those logs that it's sort of polling and checking who the primary is. Is there a race condition if a new primary is elected before that check comes through, or is that check performed like as part of every single write operation?
Yeah, it's performed right now. It's just doing it like on a every time it does the health check. After it does the health checks, we could just not store it internally, and we could just every time you want to ask for the primary, we could go directly to the database. I haven't worked out. I think that's right now. That's probably the first thing to do. Just ping the database every time you need to know who the primary is, and then we'll always have the latest state of who the actual primary is. Yeah, so that is a concern, right? Like if you get a point where you have a failover and then everyone is their internal state is different from what actually is reflected in the database, you could have a problem.
I mean, that would only impact like a transient failure where like some other node has decided to elect a different Gitaly, like it's elected Gitaly 2, but then immediately after Gitaly 2 is elected, Gitaly 1 becomes accessible. And so a prefect that hasn't noticed Gitaly 2 is elected continues to write to Gitaly 1, and then you end up with like a split situation.
Yeah, so that's a split brain. That's why I'm thinking that I might. Right now, the current merge request does just update its internal state, but I'm thinking just removing that and just passing it directly to the database every time we need to know who the actual primary is. But yeah, that's a good question. So let's just verify that writes. Let's see. Well, let's just do the basic. Well, how do I check if that project was? replicated, right? Right now we can only look at the directories themselves. Is that right? Or what's the best thing to do? Just run the script that just periodically makes changes to it. Well, let me just bring down. Let's do the most simple thing right now, and just bring down. GitLab. If I bring down Gitaly here, all right. It does take a little while to kick in, so I'm guessing if I hit reload, it might get a 404 right away, because it, it's going to take, right now it's going to take 10 seconds or so to kind of reflect this. So now you see that it's switched to Gitaly 2. Let's see if Gitaly 2 came up. All right, so it took us about 10 seconds to recover or so, but they've all switched over to Gitaly 2. And let's see if that's reflected here. Well, there's all sorts of crazy graphs here. Hopefully there isn't like a disagreement partway through it. Yeah, so this is interesting. I'm not sure if there might have been a split brain here, right? It's like,
Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, if the write came through because it's only on the health check and the health checks are out of sync by, I guess, like a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
Also depends when the Prometheus scraping happens,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it matters a lot, but yeah, we do have to, we if we see extended periods of crossing, then you get really concerned.
Stan, is there configuration around like the failover metrics? So like you said, it takes 10 seconds. So that requires like a certain number of failed health checks from a certain number of nodes.
Yeah, so, sorry, go ahead.
I was like, I guess my question is, do you think we should just sort of like start with what we think is a good default, which gives us more flexibility to completely change and rewrite that whole mechanic, like versus offering some sort of like variable configuration, which allows us to make it more or less aggressive?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's hard coded right now, so that could, like I said, I put this configuration section here in case we did want to start having knobs and things that we can turn. But yeah, the thresholds and all that, what is a failure right now? So this table is being used as kind of like an election process, because it will only consider healthy nodes that that have 2 or more prefix saying it's up, right? So if you actually look at the query that it's running, this query here is basically saying, give me the list of active nodes that 2 prefix nodes said were up, right? This is kind of like your quorum, right? So if you had one prefix node, if only one prefix node could talk to Gitaly 1, for example, we wouldn't consider that, because the other prefix nodes said, hey, there's something wrong with that node. So it's kind of like taking a majority vote here.
Cool. I guess we could also start at like a relatively conservative approach anyway, like having automatic failover after a node being inaccessible by the majority of nodes for like 30 seconds and then automatically recovering. Like in most situations, that is like ideal. Well, like it's a good outcome, like compared to like a complete outage. So if we're comparing it to the current situation, being conservative so that we avoid like node bouncing like every couple of seconds,
Right.
that's maybe better to start there and then dial it down as we become more confident in our methodology.
Right. Yeah, all the criteria for like how often, like right now there's no debouncing. So if one node started failing, every 10 seconds, we could bounce from one Gitaly node to another. So that could be a problem. Okay, what else would anybody here like to see?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are we planning to expose the current primary status through the UI somewhere, or to admins through the API or the UI?
It's a good question, James. What do you think?
I think that is like, yes, but probably not in the general, like the GA. Like I don't think it's critical that we expose it directly through the admin interface. Like we do have observability through the Grafana dashboards, and we will be supplying like default dashboards that provide this information, and the Prometheus metrics make it observable. I think improving the admin interface is something that is generally important for a number of features, including like automatic shard rebalancing. And as part of that, I think we can also look to improve some visibility of these metrics directly into GitLab UI.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, I think having it in Prometheus is going to be like the #1 priority. Having it in the UI is kind of nice, but I know from like geo experience, the UI was handy definitely for getting kind of high-level summaries, but knowing when failovers happen, these graphs are much more important, right? Having like timelines and knowing which nodes are where. Especially if you got like, we have like 40 shards, right? That's going to be a lot of data to kind of have to show on our admin panel somehow, right? Whereas Prometheus allows you to query, filter, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about it from a testing perspective, but we're also going to be inspecting the actual servers themselves to see whether or not they're up. So we wouldn't be relying on that data anyway. I have no idea how to incorporate Prometheus into testing, but I'm sure there's a way.
Right. I mean, it would be at the very least you could scrape the metrics, right? So
Yeah.
you know, the easiest thing here is, you know, if I do what was it, 9236, 9326? What did I see? 9652. Right. If you do, I mean, basically it gives you, can't really see that bit well, but you can see that this is the primary, right?
Yeah.
So this kind of data you could easily just curl and parse it if you needed to.
Yep. That would be easy enough. Cool. Thanks.
I don't really have a demo to bring down prefig right now because that's the next step of like that you know, we're gonna have to figure that out as well, right? Like if we use like a load balancer and somehow prefig encounters an error, how do we bring down that prefig gracefully so that it doesn't like screw everybody else up?
Yeah, there's I mean, there's also not much point demoing it because the replication queue is still in memory. So
Oh, is it? Oh yeah,
that
that's
hasn't
right.
merged yet.
Oh, that hasn't merged yet. This isn't okay.
No,
Even though we have the tables here. Is it? I mean, I know this is in the.
Yeah. The tables there, I think it's almost merged. I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I
actually switching over to use the SQL.
So just to clarify, Stan, this configuration you've got is actually pointing the GitLab application just at prefect 1. So if prefect 1 goes down,
right, exactly.
And so that also means that the replication queue would be entirely stored in memory on prefect 1.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So this, even though this is scraping prefect 1 and prefect 2, you would never see it actually change, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And this I need to figure out how to plot histograms better on Grafana so that it's more useful. This is just going to be increasing like crazy.
I think in Grafana, if you click into one of those graphs, there's like a suggestion that we used. I forgot where it was.
I think when we just typed the metric the first time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's like
heat map? I don't know.
I think we just, what was it? Maybe we didn't use latency bucket. Maybe it was a different metric. What was it?
I think it was. Is there some kind of audit? Yeah, I remember something popped up where they're like, yeah.
Anyway, this is all part of just getting this the default dashboard. So every time someone does this demo, I don't have to recreate this.
Paul, I think you're assigned that issue to look at the dashboards. When do you plan on looking at?
Yeah, I was going to hit that today. I don't know if I was looking through the script right now. I don't see, because I remember last time we just kind of, I think, John, you had some like stash somewhere, right? Was that written anywhere, those queries that we used when I ran the demo?
No, but most of them are actually on the dashboard for GitLab.com prefect. So
Okay.
you can take a look there.
Okay, I'll just rip them out of there. Yeah, we should have that in by this Friday, hopefully, for the next demo.
Yeah, even if we just get one thing in, then we can like decide that the dashboards are no good in the next demo and tweak the query, and then it's just a matter of like merge request to update the query.
Yeah, it'll be easy after that.
I'm not sure if there's much else to demo on this front, Stan.
Okay.
So I have a couple
one question-
high-level questions. You can go ahead, James.
You guys, no, you go, Paul.
So I was just wondering, the consensus, I haven't visited this in a while, since I think the original discussions came up on using console and all that. The main thing that we're concerned about here is just the split brain where we're sending queries to a primary and it's not getting replicated because it's like some kind of network isolation, right? Where we've got some kind of we've got like a network partition. That's the primary issue that we're concerned about when we're looking through the demos and evaluating the leader election for a shard. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, there's a couple things, right? First of all, it's you've got to nominate a leader, right? And so that means driven. We need HA in the prefect. We need HA in the Gitaly nodes, right? So in order to have, let's say now that we have multiple prefix, they all have to agree on who is going to be the primary for the Gitaly node, right? So we're kind of tackling a bunch of problems here. We're tackling, okay, they all have to agree, so you can't have it in memory because they all have to share this kind of the consensus that, hey, Gitaly 1 is the primary, right? And then the second thing is, okay, how do we get them to agree on which one is up, right? So my first iteration was let's just, basically any Gitaly, whatever Gitaly node is healthy, we'll try to elect that as like the first, as like the primary, and just that will be the primary, and that works okay, right? Because if it's just like a greedy thing where everybody just tries to nominate somebody and whoever happens to insert it into the table wins, like that can work. But then what happens if you get to a state where only one of these prefect nodes can actually talk to that Gitaly node, right? Now you have a problem where suddenly like that node is clearly broken, but the two out of the three nodes are saying, hey, somebody else should be the leader here, and now what do you do, right? So this is why I introduced this a little bit more complex, where I have the separate table, and then I do a query based on activity of who reports in here to actually do the election, right? So everybody is doing the similar query. I mean, if you look at this log, everyone is basically running the same query as like, these are the healthy nodes. This is the healthy node query. So they should, in theory, get consistent results, assuming like this, actually, this is not the, is this the actual? Yeah, this is the active one. So assuming that, there isn't too much craziness with the ping times, like everyone should be reporting in within 10 seconds. So they should all have a consistent list of who's healthy, right? And then based on who's healthy, they should nominate almost the same node each time, right? So even if they, right now the thing is, if this is healthy, if this entry is healthy, it doesn't do anything, right? Everyone says, okay, I agree that this node is fine, I'm not going to touch it, right? As soon as we get to the point where this node ends up being deemed unhealthy, then somebody's going to say, hey, that guy is no longer good, we need to do something. And then they'll each prefect node will basically do the same query, and they should come up with the same result and say, if Gitaly 2 goes down, Gitaly 3 is now the new guy. So again, it's adding complexity to the consensus algorithm. Doing it in SQL is a little bit dicey. I'm sure there's corner cases here that I haven't worked through yet. But this is why I think console is really the future, because they've got mathematical proofs that this is guaranteed and all that, right? Like I can nominate one leader and they'll figure out the consensus and all that, right? that's the next step. But this is really our kind of our bridge gap, because console is going to be another component. We're going to need to get that up and running. Got to have 3 nodes of that, and so this is sort of the interim step of helping us get to Gitaly HA without having to introduce a whole new component. So sorry, that's a
And
long-winded answer.
it also provides a bridge towards a cloud native approach, because it would be quite possible to run the prefect nodes in Kubernetes in some kind of configuration. And we probably don't want to be running console in Kubernetes when Kubernetes provides like alternative primitives that may be able to solve some of this stuff. So
yeah, so we may need to do a cloud native election process too, right? Like,
yeah.
But anyway, the code, you've merged the code refactoring to allow us to kind of plug in different strategies. So hopefully we can, eventually settle on like the right strategy that we think is going to be sort of the majority, like what everybody wants to do. So this is more of a kind of a stopgap, I'd say.
So we've been talking a lot about the leader being elected. Do we care at all about the non-leaders, the secondaries, disappearing and reappearing? Would this be helpful with regards to that, or are we not concerned about that at all?
That's a good question. I mean, this is what this table is for. So if we want to use this as a health check for secondaries, we can do that too, right? Like we can start to mark unhealthy secondaries as well. But that's that's the main focus, is get the primary right, and then obviously we need to figure out like, okay, what happens when a secondary does go down? It's probably less of an issue because the primary right is the most important thing right now, right? If a secondary goes down, maybe we don't propagate that right, but we can bring it up in the background and people don't freak out.
Cool, thank you. So this is kind of a step back. I'm wondering, do we actually do we actually have to worry about split brain if we are introducing transactions where we have like a majority quorum that is getting written to? If we know that we always have a quorum every time that we're making a change and then seeing it propagate to the secondaries, do we still need to worry about split brain?
I think so, because like the quorum doesn't mean every node agrees. So consider the situation where you've got like some repository that isn't in sync, because it might not be a whole node level failure. And you could end up with failing over to a different Gitaly node, but for some reason, the most recent transaction failed on that node for one of the repos. That repo is then now inconsistent with other repos. And so there's like a range of factors that could result in like a problem, because you've got to consider node level problems and also repo level problems. Transaction won't necessarily always succeed across all repos.
I'm wondering if we need to have all repos, because I know some databases, they do something like that, where if you write a quorum, you win. And then if you don't, if there's like one that gets missed, like a minority is missed, then there's a way to eventually repair that later or catch it on the next transaction. It's kind of unrelated. It's a side note. I'll have to create another issue to discuss this in more detail.
I think that's what a replication queue can help with, because that can essentially become a repair queue. So the replication queue essentially looks at nodes that are considered good. And so if we're tracking with fine-grained resolution in a tracking database, which I think Pablo's work would lead to, like we can know like, oh, this repo is on this shard is stale. So like basically not only should it be like recovered, but also excluded from transactions for the time being, because we shouldn't be considering bad nodes in future transactions probably.
Yeah, good point. I'll create an issue so we can chat more about that async.
Yeah, it's an interesting question though. I think it'd be nice to design the system where like if we did have a split brain, it may be mitigated by that whole consensus of like putting that in 3-phase commit, right? Like, okay, I maybe I got the wrong. Let's say I have A, B, and C, and somebody thinks A is the master, but B somebody else thinks B. Well, if they happen to go to those nodes, they all say, okay, well, we'll agree on something, and then eventually it gets persisted anyway. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully we're not so sensitive, but we haven't gone that far yet, I guess. I had to actually look
Yeah,
at
I
the
mean,
replication queue here. It's interesting that we've got these columns here. Anyway, go. Sorry.
yeah, I was going to say, like, depending on the situation, like it might be possible to like try and recover in the middle of the transaction, like just sort of force, like decide like we've reached quorum and then like force non-agreeing nodes to like come into sync in
Right.
the transaction, because then you could, like, you're reducing the situations where like, and if for some reason that node refuses and is stubborn, like doesn't come into consistency, you just mark the whole node as like problematic, because like that would be treated as like a should succeed operation. And if that operation isn't succeeding, then there's a whole problem on that Gitaly node. And then you follow like the recovery process. And at that point, it's like, you're not having to track such fine-grained information at a repo level. Makes it easier to reason about. Stan, interested in your thoughts on bouncing, because that was something we briefly mentioned isn't addressed here, but is a like it's a risk concern. Like,
Yeah.
if like there's some sort of network event that is like impacting a data center, it's quite possible that like you could result in a situation where high availability makes things worse, rather than just sort of being like, no, we're detecting some like more broader anomaly. I mean,
Yeah, I have to look at what other people are doing about debouncing, right? Because like, if this is a concern that we have, in this case, the bouncing would happen if, like, let's say, different nodes went up and down, like let's say like the network, and maybe so in this case, like two out of the 3 nodes have to say, hey, that guy is not healthy anymore, right? So again, that helps mitigate that, because if it's just one prefect node saying that something is wrong, then at least there's a little more stability there. You could add debouncing by, backing off your failure thresholds a bit. Like if it happens in the last, minute or so, you start to increase the threshold at which you actually do a failover. But I don't know. Like I think we're gonna have to look at what other products are doing, because I don't think I'm guessing Petroni doesn't do anything that sophisticated either. Like I think you have the same similar issues, and it hasn't been too much a problem for us there. But yeah, and I'm wondering if it's, we get to the point where bouncing isn't as big of a deal as we think it is, because let's say we just keep rotating primaries, that may be okay. It hopefully isn't such a pain to recover. But again, like I said, I haven't really thought through all the kind of things that we're worried about here.
yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Like maybe it's not a problem to be solved urgently if we're not observing it. And maybe all we need is like some kill switch, so that it's like really easy for an admin to be like, just stop doing automatic failovers. Like we're in a situation where for some reason bouncing is happening, just like stop. And if there's an easy way to turn failover off across the whole fleet, or for like a specific shard, then without having to run reconfigure on all 3 nodes, then that could be interesting.
Maybe that needs. Maybe that means we need an API for admins to be able to tell a prefect which primary to stick on, or should we rely on the configuration file for that?
I'm not sure we want a configuration, because that could change from time to time, but maybe what we need to do is keep track of how many failovers have happened in the last like a minute or so, and that's an error threshold, right? Like if we exceed that threshold by some amount, we either stop doing failover, or we send out an alert, or we do something. first thing we do is just start tracking it. Like, let's say is this happening at all? And then the second question is, do you raise your failure thresholds too? Like right now, it's a node is deemed inactive if it has not reported in once in the last 10 seconds, right? That's, I think John's, your memory one does a little bit more like, hey, if it hasn't passed 3 health checks in a row, then it's down, right? Like we can tweak
Yeah.
our thresholds
Yeah.
for
You can
deciding
change that
when a node is
heuristic.
actually down.
Yeah.
We can either we start to see it flapping, so we start either increasing the threshold by which you decide a node is up or down, right? You can tweak those knobs too to say, hey, look, we're not gonna fail over because, somebody's got a crappy network, and so we're just gonna, hold off and not worry about that until they really are getting higher error rates. So there's many ways to tackle it, right? You can raise thresholds all over the place. You can send error flags, but as far as I can tell, I haven't seen a lot of debouncing stuff going on in like console either, right? Like I don't know if this is a well fleshed out problem yet.
From what I understand, this is like Jakob would have to correct me on this if I'm wrong, but it's a rare thing that pops up, and when it does, it creates huge outages, but it's like a really rare edge case. It's on a bunch of post-mortem articles from various companies.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to do is start tracking the rate of which you're having failovers, right? If you start to see that rate starting creeping or higher than you expect, like let's
Yeah.
say once every minute, like that could be at least a starting point. Like if that's happening that often, you've got a problem, right?
You could just that's just a ripcord for automatic failover. Just
stop doing this.
stop it. Yeah.
Just mark that
Yeah.
chart down and just stop and just send out pages to everyone.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like GitLab.com. Essentially, like what like kill switches do we need to be more like? I think we've got the playbooks where we can just turn it off by like running reconfigure.
That's a little slow though, right?
Right. So like, what would I don't know. I asked Alejandro the other day. I was like, "Yo, how do you feel about like running automatic failover in production once we have that running in the next like 2 weeks?" He was like, "Oh yeah, feeling pretty good about it." Like, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's surprising." I was like, but also glad you have such confidence in the team because they are all smart people. But I don't know. I would feel more comfortable as a product manager, like if there was like some sort of really fast kill switch where we could like see a problem and just be like slack stop and then like prevent that being a problem.
Is there a signal we could just have, like Gitaly, the prefix process, we can receive a signal to just stop failover? That could be one,
I don't know.
but you have to do it on multiple nodes too. It's kind of annoying.
I mean, the kill switch is not a bad idea. Like just having some sort of thing, like if it reaches some level of flapping, then just like disable automatic failover for some like enormous amount of time. And there's like just a database row that basically says like failover is enabled for like 24 hours, or is it disabled for 24 hours or like 6 hours until someone can like reevaluate the situation. Then we've at least like mitigated it. Like we see flapping, it starts happening for 5 minutes. We know that like, even if we did nothing, like it's going to stop within like some period of time.
What are the types of things that cause us to fail our health check? It's just a gRPC ping. That's all we're doing is just a gRPC health check.
Right now, it's just a health check, right? So, if the process stops, I mean, it's possible that they respond with a health check and it's actually not working too, right? That's the flip side.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking is, I mean, maybe the bounce, maybe bouncing around is really what we want, because if we can't communicate with something, why would we stay elected to it? I don't know. I would think if we saw a lot of bouncing, we would just want to kind of increase the amount of time it takes to make a decision before the next bounce. If we've like gone through all of the hosts, like every time we've rotated through every possible node and we still see this pattern of, bouncing, then we should increase the amount of time to, I don't know, maybe exponentially just increase the amount of time it takes to.
Yeah, you could have a backup mechanism, right? Like every
Yeah.
failover, the threshold gets a little bit harder, and then it kind of comes back down again over time, right? Like,
Yeah, because I mean, you only want it to not bounce if you see this pattern happening across the entire set of.
well, it could be flapping between two
nodes,
nodes,
right?
right? You could go between 1 and 2, 1 and 2, back and forth.
That depends on how we're. So how does that work? So if we have equal chances of being elected a leader, is there a strategy to which one gets chosen in your SQL
Right now,
implementation?
it's actually like the way this thing works right now is it will sort by the name right now in ascending. So it'll sort by the number of prefect nodes that say that thing is up, and then also tie breaks are made by just the name right now. It's, obviously we can make that random if we wanted to.
Like thinking of this through, like we're talking about like actual like reasons where like the node might be wrong, but like imagine like an application logic failure. So just like we made a mistake, and like in the application code, which causes it to flap. Like this is essentially like a feature like any other feature. Like if we've made a mistake or we make a regression when we're upgrading something, we may just want to be able to turn it off, because like that would mean that,
Yeah.
oh, we don't have to redeploy Gitaly to fix like this problem, or like suddenly shut down all these prefect nodes. Like there's the possibility that this isn't just like we'd want to flap it. It could be that we've legitimately made a mistake. So having a kill switch is useful for those
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
situations.
The question is like, what is the most useful kill switch you can have? Like, probably something we check in the database, right? Because you can just update it in one place and say, hey,
Yeah.
turn that off, right?
I mean, what if there was just a command you run like on a prefect node and it just sort of inserts the record?
Yeah,
and so
that's
like
sure. It doesn't even have to
that's
be.
the
Yeah, it could
cheapest.
just be anything, like any tool we make that changes that flag or something.
Cool. Well, it sounds like we need an issue on this front. And it's probably something worth, I don't know, I feel like I would like it to be done before we turn automatic failover on production. Given that Gitaly is deployed automatically. Like, if we make a regression, I'd love to have my backside covered.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should start moving some of these settings that are shared between different nodes in the database, right? There's a trade-off there.
Yeah. I mean, because if the one has automatic failover turned on, one doesn't, then.
Yeah, exactly. So I could see failover settings being in there, like our thresholds and all that, so we can tweak them as necessary.
I guess the question is, do those failover settings belong in the prefect database or the application database? Like, should prefect be somehow connecting through to the application database to get those so that...
I don't think we want prefect talking to the application database at all.
Yeah.
If anything, it would be
isolated.
Yeah. I guess is your concern like just getting it from the application and signaling it to?
Yeah, I guess it's more around that, like from an
Could be a
administration
special. I
perspective.
mean, if you care about an RPC, you could always do a Gitaly RPC that actually changes those prefect flags, and prefect just intercepts it and does something if you care about it that way. But
yeah, I'm thinking more about like in that admin settings area, it'd be interesting to have like some failover configuration settings. Like if these are like turn failover on and off, like turn, because then you can expose it through like the standard GitLab APIs, and then you don't have to have like some special tooling that's like kind of unique, is more what I'm thinking.
right.
How do we do that with Gitaly today? Like, do we have Gitaly settings that can be changed through the API that are currently stored? I think the answer is no. We don't have anything like that.
I mean, the closest thing we have is like feature flags, right? Like we set feature flags in the application database. It gets sent over the gRPC metadata to do something, right?
Yeah, but as far as changing a configuration for like the whole Gitaly for the entire life of it, we don't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we could use a feature flag and like somehow like if the feature flag comes through like from the Rails application as like disable failover off, then we like trip the switch. Prefect just trips the switch, updates the database, and then until it sees like a failover true on some RPC.
That's like a reverse feature flag, right? We're trying to turn off the feature. The feature's on by default, but we want to turn it on by sending the feature flag, is what you're
Well,
saying?
I think we're going to have it off by default right now, right? And then eventually turn it on. But yeah, it is interesting. Do we want a reverse one? Yeah.
So we can continue this in an issue. Well, any other questions from anyone else? If not, I'll just quickly review this. We'll summarize. So I'll create an issue about changing the storage name. I might be able to do that in like docs merge request that's already open unless it's merged, so that we don't call it prefect anymore. We need an issue about the load balancer. I think we need, well, Stan, do you want to just take that as feedback around the split brain with polling and just move the check into all the mutator options, or should we create a follow-up issue?
Sorry, what specifically are you referring to?
So the leader election is just like done in the health check section, but so we don't check, like we don't update the local state and the prefect around like which that one. Do you want to take that as a follow-up, or do you want to just address that?
I may just address it because that merge request is still in review right now.
Sure.
There's still work to be done there.
I think we need a debounce / kill switch issue, just basically some sort of MVC of like, how do we turn this thing off if we make a mistake? Other than that, I think things were great. Thanks, Stan. Really appreciate your work.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. That's awesome.
Thank you.
And remember to take some time like for yourself and family. I keep seeing you on when it's like midnight, 1 a.m. and makes me worried.
It's like my only time to like, I don't know about everybody else, but I'm splitting time with, kids at home and all that, right? So like 8 o'clock is actually when they all go to sleep. I'm like, oh, I can do whatever I need to do now.
Awesome. Well, just remember to get enough rest somewhere in there as well.
All right. Thanks all.
No worries.
All right, see ya.
Bye.